Hello, and welcome to episode number 21. My name is Torsten Tavel, and today's question is, what is your default choice? And I'm sitting in front of my window, and I might be squinting a lot. It's kind of bright out. The sun's coming out. Yay! So yeah, so this question, what is your default choice? And you might be wondering, well, what do you mean by default choice? Well, kind of like the place that we kind of go, or the place that we like end up always referring back to, I guess. Or it could be what's your default story, or what's the story that you tell yourself all the time. That kind of place. Like where is it that you kind of function from your day to day? And so it might be strange to call it a default choice because it is literally a choice. You may not see it that way. I know I don't see it that way sometimes. Excuse me, but it is actually a choice, and with that acknowledgement that it is a choice, that you can actually change it. And so where is it that you go? Like, where is it that you go? And it probably actually changes from day to day, and it probably changes from the different places and spaces that you are in at different points in your life, and different times, and maybe even different times of day. But it's kind of neat because when you kind of realize that there is sort of this place that you maybe always go to, that you kind of hang out in, and what is that, and what is that for you, and how clear can you be with that for you, and what else can you choose? So it's really this the space of what we choose, or the place that we choose to hang out in. And I know for me it's different. It's different on different days. Perfect example are the last 2 days that just happened. So it was really cool because 2 days ago was kind of one of these busy days, and it was fun because I actually acknowledged it during the day. Yay! But it was interesting because I had to get up really early to give Carly and I a ride to the airport. It was like at 4:45 in the morning or something like that. I got up, and we had to leave around 5. And I got up, and something was pinging me, and so I ended up opening my computer. And actually, I opened my phone and saw what was going on. And so I opened my computer and I put it in order for some gold futures. And so I put in the order, played on that a bit, and then went to the airport, dropped Carlene off, came back, ended up talking to my sister for a little while, made a connection with somebody she knows to host me for a foundation class, which I don't know when it'll be, but there's one coming out in Saskatchewan. So that was fun. And then there was a couple other things that happened, and it was really one of these days that things were just flowing, and it was super fun. So kind of the place that I was hanging out with, in my default for that particular day, was that things were just going, and it was really cool. And there was a lot of sort of possibility showing up in my world. And then yesterday was a different day. And so it was interesting to see just where I was, and things weren't flowing, and it wasn't that it was that I was aware of what else was possible to choose yesterday, and I just simply chose not to choose it. And there's a lot going on, a lot of projects going on, and which requires a lot of sort of back end stuff that just has to get done in order for them to come out. And I just simply wasn't in the space of doing it. But what I did do was I went down the beach, and there's a couple little sort of hidden beaches right by our house, like literally 5-minute walk. And it was really cool to, like, the excitement that I got from kind of discovering them and realizing how close they were and how much they contribute, even if I probably won't go there as much as I think I will. But it's just there, and it's so close, and it's like this little world that just shows up. And what was cool about that, and I don't even know where I'm going with this, but what was cool about that was this acknowledgement of like the location for this particular place that we chose was different. And I'm coming to realize, like, when you make choices and you choose things, they kind of show up in many, many different ways. And in this case, I have never lived this close to the, well, I shouldn't say that, I have in different countries, but in this country, in the city here, this is probably almost the closest I've lived. I have lived close to the ocean, just in a different way. And anyways, just the contribution of that was amazing. And the acknowledgement, like, of that it's literally a 5-minute walk, and there's 2 different beaches. One's an actual beach and one is more of a rock outcropping. So they're 2 really different places and spaces. And so it was just really cool to see that. But when it came to like yesterday of like putting things into action, I wasn't putting other things into action. And so when you talk about default choice, I was making myself wrong for that. And where do we all do that? And so that's kind of what kind of spurred this particular topic, was like this default choice. If I'm not doing what I have set out for myself to be doing that day, I was making myself wrong for not actually doing that, not actually actualizing that, not going through with what I had quote unquote planned to do that day. Did the day show up in a different way? Absolutely. It was a huge contribution to actually just go down and discover these 2 places. And so it was interesting. So in this example of, you know, what is your default choice in your life, in your living, I was going into making myself wrong for not actually actualizing what I had planned to do that day, and never really acknowledged, actually until I'm talking about it now, what a contribution it was just to do something different. Do those things that I was planning on doing yesterday still require to be done? Yeah, absolutely. They still require to be done. And they will get done. And it's just so interesting how different things spawn different things as well. And so it's like looking at these places that we function and then going, okay, so what else can I choose? Instead of going into this, which I think a lot of people do, go into this default choice of wrongness of themselves, you really start to see of like, okay, so what else can I choose in this moment? And if I wasn't making something a wrongness, what else could it show up as? Like, what else could show up in my life if I wasn't constantly making myself wrong for something that isn't necessarily wrong? Just choosing to do something different that day, as an example yesterday, than what I had actually planned on doing. And so it was really interesting. It was really interesting on that, like, just how much we kind of live on autopilot in a way, like where we're just like in the same, choosing the same thing, kind of where you kind of end up, or not where you end up, but really choosing this place, or being aware that we choose things regularly, the same thing, that doesn't always which doesn't always acknowledge what actually is, and doesn't necessarily contribute to more, or it doesn't necessarily contribute to really realizing that you are choosing something different, and just because you're choosing something different in that moment doesn't mean it's right, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. And so, like, I'm just using those 2 days as an example, but it can be many different things. Like, it could be maybe choosing that you always seem to choose up ending up eating the same food, and you're like, I shouldn't be eating this food, and so on. Instead of like kind of asking what is required and what works, and if your body actually maybe requires that. What does your body require today? And it may also be about getting out and being physical, whether it's going for a walk, or whether it's going for the gym, to a gym, or going for a swim, or whatever it may be. Maybe some days your body requires more of that, and then other days it doesn't. It doesn't mean that it's a requirement to do it every single day, or not every single day, or choose not to ever do it, whatever the case may be. And so it's really interesting. It's really interesting to play also with your body in this reality too. Like, how much do you have certain default choices around your body? And how much actually certain things work for you. It's funny, I was putting on clothing this morning, as you do, and I'm like, there's nothing really super exciting to wear today. And so it's interesting because I don't have a lot of clothing. I don't have a lot. I'm a bit of a minimalist. And so when I look at what actually works for me, that actually works for me on many levels. And also I get that having a turnover to some degree doesn't mean that I require a lot of clothing, but just having a bit of a turnover of clothing is something that my body actually is asking for. Not so much me as a being, but my body definitely. And so it's looking at that and just looking at, okay, so maybe I don't, clothing's not a big thing on my list, yet it would be nice to have a bit of change with that as well. And I get that also as a contribution. So it's looking at all these different ways that it can show up, and different ways that you don't, that you maybe don't ask all the time about. And so, so that was those are kind of like a couple of small examples of it. And, looking at your life, like, where do you end up going to these default things? Is it something to do with your body? Is it something to do with maybe relationships? You always end up choosing the same type of person in a relationship. Maybe choosing a certain way of being with finances in your world. It's really looking at those things that you keep on choosing, your default of choice, basically. And seeing how that works for you, and seeing what you would like to change with that, and then asking questions around that, and asking questions around what can change. And I don't know if I had this conversation in my head or I had it last week, I don't know. But there is this conversation about, and I maybe talked about it to other people. It's funny, I don't really recall often what I say sometimes, but I remember at a class, somebody was in a class and they asked a question. They're like, hey, so what question can I ask? Like, what energy, space, and consciousness can I be to whatever? And Gary's like, yeah, that's the question. And I'm like, huh? Yeah, like, what energy, space, and consciousness can me and my body be to, and then fill in whatever it is. And that is literally the question. That's the whole practice of being the question, of asking that question. And so it was funny, I was playing with that the other day, and it's a question that I've been asking every morning lately, and playing with that, and also asking that question before I go to sleep at night. And it's interesting how that's kind of shifted what's been showing up when I wake up. I actually am different when I wake up in the morning. And so it's playing with whatever question it is that works. But it's really, really playing with asking questions and really getting into the space of being a question. It was interesting. I had a meeting this morning with a friend of mine, Kimberly, and we're in the process of creating something. And as our meeting started, I was excited about something, and we went on this tangent. I went on a tangent, and it was about stock trading. It was really interesting because I was just excited about it. And so when I was talking to her about that, the way I do trading is very much being the question. I don't actually ask a lot of questions. And the questions that I ask don't really create for me like they might for other people. And so for me, it is more being in the questions and looking for, or being aware of the whispers of your knowing, or the whispers of my knowing in this case. And that's actually how I have always functioned when doing that. And so it's interesting, like, how much do you actually do that? How much do you be the question and you listen to those whispers of your knowing, and that is what you use to choose whatever you're choosing in that moment. And I know I've talked about this before, but I was watching a documentary some years ago about Philip Glass. He's a pianist and a composer. And he really talked about that. When he was composing a piece of music, he would be looking for the whispers, and in this case, it would be notes that he was writing down. And he said they were sometimes so faint that he wasn't sure if he actually heard the correct notes. And that's how we would compose a piece of music, which was really, really cool. Because he was literally listening to those whispers. He was using his knowing and his perceiving to create a piece of music for, and he did a lot of stuff for film, actually, composing for film. And so he said, it's that it is not it's not the place where you get hit over the head and it's so obvious, and it sometimes is, but often it isn't. Often it is this place where things are so kind of quiet, like they're there, but you're not entirely sure, but you are sure, and you have this awareness and this knowing of what is possible with this creation. And I'm going to use his example of creating a piece of music. And he said that is really and I'm going to use different words, like that's really the actualization of it for him. It's the process that he goes through for actualizing something. And so I do the same thing when I trade stocks. It is that listening to the whispers, and you don't always know, and you know. And when things actualize in a way that you know is possible, it's really cool. And that's the fun part of it. That's the part that's fun. And so these are two different examples of playing with that and really realizing, like, how much do you know, and where do you play with that in your life? Because that space is very different than the space of choosing a default. Because a default is a learned thing, essentially, the thing that we learn to do to be like everyone else. Whereas when you follow your knowing, it's what you know that no one else knows. It's what you know and your awareness of what could create something different. It's your contribution to how things are showing up. And it's your contribution to really what else is possible. And so, what if we, one, were in that space a lot, and two, what questions could you ask? And how much do you actually know about all this? And how much awareness do you have of everything that you think everyone else has? And when you're doing things and you realize, like, oh, wait a second, like, am I listening to the whispers here? Am I listening to the whispers of my knowing? And what can you play with around that? And maybe ask yourself, like, 20 times throughout the day, am I listening to the whispers of my knowing in this very moment? And what are they? What are those whispers? And what are the possibilities that I haven't been willing to be aware of? And then look at what you'd like to create in your world and ask, what energy, space, and consciousness can me and my body be to actualize blank, to create blank? And play with that. And it's like really, it's really fun, like when you actually ask questions, what can show up. What was really cool, we had Thursday? Yeah, so last week, we had, Carlina and I did a clearing night on No More Problems. And it was so cool. It was so much fun because we got to see where I got to see some of the people that I know, and they're showing up and they were actually asking questions that they've never asked before. And they were looking at their life of problems and realizing that they were making a lot of things in their life a problem. And it's like this default choice that you make. It's like literally things in your life are a problem. That's a default choice. When you actually don't have any problems and you're constantly trying to create problems in your life, which doesn't allow you to really expand and be all that you be. And it's really looking at what would I like to choose in every 10 seconds and what else is possible there. And not going to making yourself wrong for choosing problems, but just being aware of, like, oh, maybe I actually choose problems quite a bit. And looking at every situation in your life, is this actually a problem? Or am I just creating it as a problem so that I have a solution, so I can look for a solution and fix it, instead of just what else is possible here? What else can I choose? And for me, it's really ease. Like, can I create more ease in my world? And I love ease. And I still look at all the places I don't choose it. And I don't make it as a wrongness, but it was fun today because I went out to pick up a microphone. And it was a bit of a drive, like an hour drive to get to this place to pick up the microphone. And I get there and the person isn't there. And initially I was like, a little frustrated. And then I looked at it, I'm like, okay, so what else can I choose? And what else is possible with this? And if I was choosing ease, what would I choose? And I was also aware of, I knew before I left to contact this person, and I didn't. What am I aware of? And so it's all those things put together, right? It's not just one thing. And so really it's this place and the space of like, okay, so I drove to this place, the mic wasn't there, what else is possible? I had a time frame that I could only hang out, which I did, and so on. And so going forward, I'm like really looking at what else is possible here. And there are a few possibilities that are showing up that would probably actually create more ease. And so I started looking at this place that I was choosing from, and instead of looking at all possibilities and asking which one would create more ease, I'm aware of, well, at least one possibility that would create much more ease than that. And so it's really looking at these different things, and it's like, interesting. I had an awareness, didn't follow it. Cool. Get to the place, person isn't there. I can go into frustration or choose not to. I chose it for 30 seconds. And then I started asking what else was possible. And then I realized, didn't follow my awareness. And if I was actually choosing ease, what would I choose? And the other thing is I got awareness, other awarenesses through the whole experience of going there. We have an electric car, and it was tight on range, and I was playing with how much range I can get out of it, and ended up finding out that if I drive conservatively, you can get a lot more range. That's strange. So it was no problem getting back, and I thought I might have to charge along the way, and I didn't. And so I could see the capacity of what else was possible with that. And so it's all these different things. Like I got so much awareness out of doing this trip, and it's really cool. Like I think the biggest difference in this particular scenario for me was that there wasn't a lot of wrongness in the world, and there wasn't a lot of problem in the whole scenario, which it would have been way more, 6 months ago, for sure, without question. And just looking like, really, what else? If I was starting to look from ease, what would I choose? What default would I use? And one of them is like, well, what ease can I choose here? And if I was choosing ease, would I choose this? So these are just some ideas kind of and really like looking at how we live our life and what we can choose different. And the lightness that we can be, and the lightness that we actually are, but don't really choose it. When you're choosing a lot of problems or defaults in your choices, it may not create what you are actually truly desiring to create. And how fast would you be able to change your life, even though you don't think it's possible? And how fast are you? And how much ability do you have for a change? And how much do you actually choose? And what else can you choose? And what else can you play with? And that's my invitation, really, for doing these weekly calls or Facebook Lives, and they show up different places. So it's not a Facebook Live necessarily to you if you're watching this videos show. It's really to give ideas of different possibilities for you to choose. And if you have any particulars, please let me know. It's always fun to get feedback and post some comments, and I'd be totally interested in exploring different things that you're interested in playing with. So thank you so much for joining this week. Have an awesome coming weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Have a good one. Bye.